I can still feel the biting cold of that morning. It was March, and the thermometer read almost 3 degrees below zero in the mountains where I was. Dawn had barely begun to brighten the sky when I raised my gun and pointed it at an old man's head. My finger on the trigger, my heart empty. At least that's what I thought. My name is Rashid, and today I am 32 years old. But when I look in the mirror, I see a man who seems to have lived several lives. Perhaps because, in a way, I have. For 17 years of my existence, I wore the uniform of the Taliban. I started as a soldier as a teenager at 13 and rose through the ranks until I became commander of a unit that had a very specific mission: to locate hidden Christians, capture them, extract information from them, and, when the final order arrived, eliminate them. I was efficient, too efficient. My reputation spread, and it wasn't the kind of reputation anyone with a conscience would want. But I had no conscience back then. I only had orders and blind obedience. Each life I took was just another number, another task accomplished. I had become exactly what they wanted: a human weapon programmed to destroy everything that represented what they called a threat. On that freezing morning, the man kneeling before me was 72 years old. I later learned his name was Ahmad, but at that moment he was just another target. His hands were bound with wire behind his back, and the metal had already torn his skin in several places. Dried blood stained his long white beard. For the previous 3 days, he had endured everything our interrogation methods offered: a dark basement, beatings, sleep deprivation, hunger, thirst. We had broken his body in every way imaginable, but there was something we couldn't break, and that bothered me deeply. All the other prisoners who passed through my hands had a breaking point. There was always a moment when they completely collapsed. They cried, begged, offered anything in exchange for a few more seconds of life. They promised to betray friends, family, anyone. They pleaded to hug their children one last time. They invented stories of having hidden money. Some cursed, others prayed desperately. But all of them, absolutely all of them, showed terror in the face of death. Ahmad was different, radically different. He simply looked at me, and in that look there was something that disarmed me from within, even with my weapon still firmly in my hands. It was a peace I had never seen before, a serenity impossible for someone in that situation. It seemed he could see right through me, as if he knew every shadow I carried, every life I had taken, every nightmare I pretended not to have. And the strangest thing, there was no hatred in those eyes, no fear, just peace. This hit me harder than any scream or plea ever could. Behind me were 5 of my trusted men, all armed, all witnesses to that execution. Hamid was my second in command, a 35-year-old who harbored hatred for Americans ever since they lost their brother in a bombing. Karim was 28, his face marked by combat scars. Yusuf was the youngest of the group, only 21 years old, but he already carried the weight of 5 deaths on his shoulders. We had all done this countless times before. It was work, protocol, a brutal way of sending a message to anyone who dared abandon our cause and convert to Christianity, the religion we saw as a foreign contamination, a spiritual virus brought by Westerners that needed to be eradicated from our land. I carefully checked my weapon, an AK-47, the most reliable there is. It works anywhere, in any temperature, in any condition. 30 bullets in the magazine. I unlocked the safety, and the metallic sound cut through the cold morning air. I examined the mechanism. Everything flawless. I had tested the weapon the previous day during training, and it worked perfectly. There was no reason for concern. The wind picked up, kicking up dust and small stones across the rocky terrain around us. Down in the valley, about 5 kilometers away, I could faintly hear the call to morning prayer echoing from the village mosque. The muezzin's voice recited the sacred words I'd known since childhood. It seemed like the right moment for it. The perfect moment, or at least that's what I thought. That's when Ahmad opened his mouth. His voice was low, almost inaudible, as if the wind would swallow his words. But somehow, each syllable reached me with absurd clarity, as if everything around had fallen silent just so I could hear. He said only 3 words, but they fell upon us like a soundless explosion. Jesus is here. I felt the men behind me shift uncomfortably. Some muttered curses, and me, I felt something churn in my stomach, a sensation I hadn't experienced in a long time, almost like fear. But that was impossible. I was the executioner. He was the bound victim. I wasn't the one who should be afraid. I laughed with contempt and spat on the ground beside him. "Your Jesus isn't going to save you now, you old fool. Your Jesus is dead, and you'll be too soon." I pulled the trigger. Click. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Just a dry, empty sound. A sound that shouldn't exist. An impossible sound. I felt my men's eyes on my back. Their breathing became heavier. Mine too. I glanced quickly at the gun, my hands beginning to tremble. The magazine was seated. The bullet was in the chamber. I could see it. The safety was released. The firing pin was working. Everything was absolutely correct. Mechanically, that gun should have fired. There was no logical explanation for that malfunction. I repositioned my aim, this time directly at the old man's chest. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart. I pulled the trigger again, harder. Click. Nothing again. Just empty sound. Sweat began to trickle down my forehead, even in the freezing cold that turned my breath into a white mist. My hands trembled now for a reason other than the weather. Something was happening. Something my mind, trained for war and logic, couldn't comprehend, but which my body recognized on a deeper level. A kind of ancient dread was beginning to rise within me, coming from a place I didn't even know existed. "Give me that gun!" Hamid yelled, forcefully snatching the rifle from my hands. He took a few steps back, pointed it at the sky, and fired. Bang! The sound of the gunshot exploded through the valley and echoed in the mountains. The weapon functioned perfectly. Hamid lowered the barrel and aimed directly at the old man's chest. The distance was minimal, perhaps 3 meters. Impossible to miss. Impossible for the weapon to malfunction. He pulled the trigger. Nothing. Total silence. He tried again, and yet again. With each attempt, the confusion on his face transformed into something more terrifying, pure panic. The gun simply wouldn't fire at Ahmad. Hamid dropped the rifle as if he were holding embers, recoiling with wide eyes. I saw in that gaze the same primal terror that was growing inside me. "Use yours," I ordered Karim, trying to keep my voice steady, but it came out shaky. Karim advanced hesitantly with his own AK-47. I had seen that weapon function flawlessly the day before. I had seen Karim hit targets 200 meters away with surgical precision. He pointed at Ahmad, his hands visibly trembling. He pulled the trigger slowly, then with more force. Nothing. The silence that followed was more deafening than any explosion I had ever heard in my entire life of war. It was a silence that screamed, that accused, that destroyed every piece of my understanding of how the world worked. It was a heavy, dense silence, laden with something I couldn't name. Yusuf picked up his weapon. Same result. Then he tried with the 9mm pistol he carried in his holster. Again, nothing. 4 different weapons, 4 different soldiers, all functioning perfectly minutes before, all completely useless now against a frail old man who couldn't have barely weighed 50 kilos. Ahmad kept looking at me. Those eyes penetrated beyond the surface, beyond flesh and bone, straight to a place inside me that I had buried long ago. A place I had covered with layer upon layer of violence, of orders followed without question, of forced indifference. A tear rolled down his wrinkled face. The dawn light, beginning to paint the mountains pink and gold, made that tear shine like a pearl. But it wasn't a tear of fear. I knew that. I could feel it. It was something else. Something I couldn't put into words. It felt like compassion, sadness for us, for me. "What kind of witchcraft is this?" Hamid yelled, his voice rising to the point of almost screaming. He stumbled backward, nearly falling onto the stones. "This isn't natural. This doesn't exist." He was right. That shouldn't exist. Not according to the laws of physics, not according to logic, not according to anything that made sense in the world I knew. But it was happening anyway, right in front of me. And then something began. Something that would change everything forever. First came a soft light, almost imperceptible, as if the very air began to glow from within. It wasn't the light of the rising sun coming up behind the mountains to the east. It didn't come from anywhere specific. It was simply there, emanating from everywhere and nowhere at the same time. It was a warm, golden light that seemed to have weight and texture. It gradually intensified, filling the entire valley with a glow that didn't hurt the eyes, but was impossible to ignore, impossible to deny that it was there. The temperature changed. The biting cold disappeared, replaced by a gentle warmth that didn't come from the sun. It was like being embraced by something invisible, as if the air itself had become palpable and welcoming. My skin tingled in a different way, one that had nothing to do with temperature. My knees began to buckle on their own. I felt an immense weight descending upon my shoulders, as if invisible mountains were pushing me down with a force I couldn't resist, but which wasn't violent. It was the weight of 17 years of blood on my hands, the weight of 37 lives I had taken, the weight of all the families I had destroyed, all that weight I had been pushing away, pretending didn't exist, burying deeper and deeper. Now it was manifesting itself physically, in reality. I fell to my knees hard against the stones on the ground. I didn't even feel the pain. The rifle slipped from my hands and hit the dusty ground with a metallic sound that seemed to scream my guilt. My hands braced themselves on the ground, trying to hold me up as my body collapsed under that invisible weight. The light continued to grow, becoming more intense, and within that light, I felt something I had never experienced in my entire life. A presence. It wasn't my imagination. It wasn't tiredness or stress. It was real as the ground beneath me, as real as the air I breathed. A living presence, conscious, unimaginably powerful, yet incredibly gentle, ancient beyond comprehension, yet as new as the dawn that was breaking at that moment. This presence was watching me, not with physical eyes, but with something far deeper. It saw me. It saw every dark thought I had ever had, every brutal order I had given, every execution I had carried out with my own hands, every tear I had caused, every scream I had ignored, every plea I had rejected. I saw it all pass before my eyes. The 11-year-old boy who lost his entire family in an explosion, the 13-year-old teenager who was recruited by hatred, the 20-year-old who had stopped feeling anything, the 30-year-old man who had transformed into a monster. I saw it all, and there was no way to hide. There were no masks there, no lies, no excuses, just the raw truth of who I really was. But the impossible, the utterly incomprehensible thing was that in the midst of all that horrible truth, in the midst of that total exposure of my darkness, I wasn't feeling condemnation. I wasn't feeling the just judgment I deserved. I wasn't feeling the rejection I had earned with every drop of blood I spilled. I felt love. It couldn't be. It made no sense at all. It contradicted all logic, all justice, everything I understood about right and wrong. I was the monster, the executioner, the one who made mothers cry, the one who left children orphaned, the one who extinguished lives like one blows out candles. How could something so pure, so infinitely sacred, look at me with love? Tears began to stream down my closed eyes. They burned, and they wouldn't stop. These were tears I hadn't shed in 17 years. Tears that had been frozen somewhere deep inside, waiting for this impossible moment to finally be released. Around me, my comrades were screaming. I could hear their voices distorted by panic, giving orders that made no sense, cursing, demanding explanations. Hamid ran from one side to the other like a trapped animal. Karim threw himself to the ground and covered his head with his arms. Yusuf was crying openly, something totally unthinkable for a Taliban soldier. The other two tried to start the vehicles to escape, but the engines wouldn't start. The entire valley had transformed into a place where normal rules no longer applied. A space where God had decided to intervene, where the supernatural had violently broken through the barriers of the natural. And it was in the midst of all that chaos, in the midst of that intense light and that overwhelming presence, that I heard the voice. It didn't come from outside. It didn't enter through my ears. It resonated within my chest, in the deepest part of who I was, in that place where human words cannot reach. It was a voice that needed neither air nor sound to be heard. It was the voice that had created the entire universe with a simple command. The voice that separated light from darkness in the beginning. The voice that parted the Red Sea. And now, in a completely incomprehensible way, that voice was speaking to me. Don't do that. 3 words. Just 3. But they destroyed 17 years of indoctrination in a second. They melted years of hatred hardened like ice exposed to the midday sun. They tore down all the walls I had so carefully built around my heart. But there was more than words there. There was absolute authority. There was creative power. There was unconditional love. There was pure truth, all condensed into those 3 syllables that vibrated within my soul. Don't do that, because this man is mine, and you are mine too. Those last words weren't spoken aloud, not even in that intimate way. I simply knew them. I knew them with a certainty that went beyond reason. I belonged to that presence. I always had. I was created by that presence. I was called by it. And all my life, all the violence, all the darkness, had been a rebellion against my own purpose. I opened my eyes, still drenched in tears I couldn't control. Ahmad was still in the same place, but now the light seemed to emanate from him, pass through him, envelop him. It wasn't that he was exactly shining. It was as if the glory that filled the valley was concentrated where he was, as if he attracted that divine presence like a magnet, and he was smiling, a smile filled with a peace I had never known, that I had never seen on any human face, that I thought didn't exist in this broken and bloody world. It was a smile that carried forgiveness for the unforgivable, hope for the desperate, love for what didn't deserve to be loved. "He loves you, Rashid," the old man said, his voice firm and clear, cutting through the surrounding chaos. "He called you by name. He's been waiting for you, waiting for this exact moment since before you were born." My mind was spinning. How did he know my name? I had never told him. During the 3 days of brutal interrogation, he only repeated one thing, a single phrase: "Jesus is Lord." Nothing else. No name. No information. No plea. Just those words repeated endlessly like a prayer until we gave up trying to hit him because it was completely useless. We deprived him of water for 24 hours. We left him in positions that caused him pain until his muscles trembled uncontrollably. We showed him photos of other Christians we had executed, threatening to do the same to his family. We yelled at him until he was voiceless. We beat him until his face swelled up, and he kept repeating, "Jesus is Lord." Now I understood. It wasn't stubbornness. It wasn't blind fanaticism. It was absolute conviction. It was personal knowledge. It was a living relationship with someone real. He knew Jesus, and Jesus knew him. He sustained him. He strengthened him. He filled him with a peace that made no sense, even in the face of certain death. I began crawling toward Ahmad, his body barely responding. My fingers were numb, not only from the cold, but from the profound shock. I started working on the barbed wire that bound his hands. The blood made the metal slippery. My hands trembled so much I could barely grip the wire. Behind me, my men were too terrified to stop me. Hamid had collapsed against a rock, gasping for breath, nearly fainting. Karim was vomiting. The others just stared blankly, unable to process what they had just witnessed. The light began to dim slowly, gradually, as if it were withdrawing, but the presence was still there. Softer now, less overwhelming, but no less real. It was as if God were saying, "You got the message. Now the choice is yours. Run," I whispered to Ahmad, when I finally managed to free my hands from him. My voice was hoarse. "Run as fast as you can and don't look back. Get out of here before they recover." But the old man didn't run. He stood there, rubbing his bloodied wrists where the wire had cut deep. Then he cupped my face in his calloused, trembling hands, covered in cuts and bruises I myself had caused. He looked straight into my eyes with an intensity that pierced me. "Your life is just beginning, son," he said, his voice laden with something that seemed prophetic. "The Rashid who climbed this mountain died here today. A new Rashid is being born. But now you need to run. Run towards the life God has for you. Run towards your purpose. And don't look back at the darkness." He was right. Of course he was. Hamid began to recover. I saw him reaching for the radio, his hands still trembling. In seconds, he would be reporting what happened. In minutes, patrols would be looking for me. In hours, I would be a dead man. Or worse. I grabbed my backpack. I grabbed the rifle that had malfunctioned. I don't know why I took it. Maybe as a souvenir, maybe as a symbol, maybe just out of survival instinct. I also grabbed 2 water canteens and the piece of dry bread that was left in my backpack. And I ran. I ran through the mountains like a hunted animal, Every step was torture. Every breath burned my lungs, but I couldn't stop. I didn't dare stop. Behind me, I heard confused shouts, yelled orders, the sound of engines finally starting, vehicles beginning the chase. They knew me well. They knew every tracking tactic I used, because I was the one who taught them. They knew how to stalk, how to surround, how to predict the prey's movements. I had trained them for years. Now all that experience was being used against me. The hunter had become the hunted. I ran for 18 hours practically without stopping, only taking quick breaks of a few minutes to drink water and get my bearings. The sun rose, reached its highest point, and began to descend. The shadows lengthened. The heat of the day gave way to the cold of the night in the mountains. My lungs felt like they were on fire from the inside. My legs weighed like lead. Every muscle in my body screamed for rest. Dehydration made my vision spin and distort, creating mirages in the rocks. I fell so many times I lost count. My hands were raw, trying to cushion the falls on the sharp rocks. My knees bled through my torn pants. My face was covered in cuts from branches and thorns. But with each fall, each time my body begged me to give up, I heard that voice. The same voice that had echoed in my chest up on the mountain. Softer now, gentler, but no less real. Get up. Keep going. I'm with you. With every step you take, I walk with you. You'll never be alone again. And I would get up again and again. Late in the afternoon, with the last rays of sunlight painting the mountains purple and gold, I found a small cave hidden among the rock formations. I had used it before, years ago, on a tracking mission. It was so well hidden that even I barely saw it in my exhausted state. I crawled inside on my hands and knees. The interior was cold, damp, and smelled of moss and old stone. But it was a refuge. It was invisibility. It was a chance to rest before my heart finally gave up. I collapsed onto the stone floor. I didn't even take off my backpack before the darkness swallowed me whole. I woke up with the sun already high, its light streaming weakly through the small opening of the cave. My body was pure pain. Every muscle ached. Every joint screamed. My hands were mangled, covered in deep cuts and scratches that had stopped bleeding but throbbed with constant pain. My lips were so cracked with thirst that they split every time I tried to open my mouth. My stomach churned with hunger, clenching like an empty, rebellious fist. The rifle was still beside me, silent, a witness to the impossible event. I picked it up with trembling hands and examined it carefully in the dim light. It worked perfectly. Now I could see it in the mechanics, feel it in the weight, in the balance. There was nothing physically wrong with that weapon. There never had been. It wasn't the rifle that had failed. It was God who intervened. This realization struck me with renewed force. God had intervened. The creator of the entire universe had descended into that dusty valley and stopped my rifle from firing. He stopped 5 rifles. He flooded the place with his presence. He spoke directly to my soul. Why? Why me? Of all the Taliban soldiers in Afghanistan, of all the executioners and assassins, why was I chosen for this supernatural encounter? I had no answers. Only questions piling up like storm clouds. I spent 3 more days in that cave. 3 days of physical and mental torture. I drank water from small puddles formed by recent rain. Water that was probably full of parasites and bacteria, but it was my only option. I ate insects I found among the rocks. Beetles, spiders, larvae. My stomach churned, threatening to vomit up the little protein I had managed to swallow. I drifted between being asleep and being awake, the line between the two becoming increasingly blurred. Nightmares showed me the faces of all the people I had killed, in such detail that I could count the wrinkles on their foreheads, see the tears on their faces. The screams filled my ears until I woke up screaming too, drenched in cold sweat. A woman in Kabul, May 2013, 32 years old, found with a Bible hidden in her mattress. I executed her with a shot to the back of the head while her 6-year-old son watched from a corner. The screams of that child still echo in my memory. A man in Jalalabad, September 2015, 45 years old. A teacher accused of sharing stories about Jesus with his students. We hanged him in the public square as a warning. His body remained there for 3 days. An elderly couple in Herat, December 2017, 73 and 68 years old. We found them with 17 other people at a secret meeting. We separated them and interrogated each one. As they did not give in after 4 days, we executed them together, holding hands until the end. 37 in total, 37 lives extinguished, 37 families destroyed. The weight of those deaths now crushed me with all its might, without the psychological defenses I had so carefully built up over the years. How could I live with this? How could I keep breathing when 37 people could no longer? What right did I have to mercy when I had shown none? But amidst these dark nightmares, there were also different dreams. Dreams that didn't come from my tormented mind, but from somewhere else. Dreams where I saw Jesus, not as I had been taught to imagine him, a weak enemy, a Western invention, a symbol of imperialist oppression, but as he truly was, a man of average height, skin the color of fertile earth, eyes as deep as bottomless wells, arms open in welcome, a man bleeding from his hands, his feet, his side, a man dying nailed to raw wood, begging forgiveness from his killer. And then he would rise again. The tomb would explode. Death itself would surrender before him. He would walk towards the light, alive, completely alive, more alive than anything that ever existed. "Who are you?" I asked in one of those vivid dreams, my voice trembling with wonder and fear. He smiled, the same smile I had seen on Ahmad's face. "I am the way, the truth, and the life," he replied, his voice like 1,000 flowing waters, like distant thunder, like the song of angels. "I am the one who called you out of darkness into my marvelous light. I am the one who forgave you even before you asked for forgiveness." "But I killed them," I protested, tears streaming down my face even as I slept. "I murdered them. I destroyed families. I caused immeasurable pain. How can you forgive me?" "Because that's who I am," he said simply. "I am the God of the impossible, and turning executioners into witnesses is what I love to do most." I woke from that dream with real tears streaming down my face, my chest rising and falling with sobs I couldn't control. Something hard and dark inside me was breaking, something that had been there for 17 years, protecting me from pain, keeping me functional like a killing machine. Now it was cracking, crumbling, and it hurt more than any physical wound. But behind the pain, there was something more, something new, something I barely dared to name: hope. On the 4th day, I decided to risk leaving. I needed real clean water, real food that wasn't insects. I had to keep moving towards the border with Pakistan, still 200 kilometers away. A distance that seemed endless on foot, pursued from all sides, without resources, without allies. A distance completely impossible by any rational calculation. But I had seen the impossible happen. I had seen rifles stop for no mechanical reason. I had seen a supernatural light fill a valley. I had heard the voice of the Creator speak directly to my soul. If God could do that, maybe he could help me travel those impossible 200 kilometers. I left the cave in the late afternoon, when the long shadows offered better cover. The world outside seemed different now, the same cliffs and valleys I had known all my life, but seen with new eyes, less hostile, less threatening, as if the earth itself knew that something had changed in me. I began hiking at night. The stars became my constant companions, shining with crystal clarity in the thin mountain air. I slept during the day in whatever shelter I could find. Caves, deep ravines, under abandoned bridges, amidst dense vegetation. I avoided the main roads as if they were rivers of lava. Every village was a potential danger. Any engine sound made me freeze and seek shelter. I drank water from streams whenever I found them. Sometimes I would go 2 whole days without water when the land was too dry. Hunger became my constant companion. I stole food from the fields when desperation overcame guilt. A few potatoes here, a handful of wheat there, green fruit from solitary trees. My stomach complained incessantly, writhing in painful knots. My body, once muscular and strong from years of intense military training, began to wither. I could feel my ribs pressing against my skin. My cheeks became sunken. My clothes, already torn and filthy, began to feel too large on a body that grew thinner every day. I was almost captured twice. The first time was at a small stream where I lingered too long. I was so thirsty that I let my guard down. A Taliban patrol appeared, following the same path. I heard their voices before I saw them. I managed to hide behind large rocks, less than 50 meters from where they passed. I held my breath for what seemed like an eternity. My lungs begged for air. My heart was pounding so hard that I was sure they would hear me. The sound seemed to echo throughout the entire valley, announcing my presence. But they walked right past, laughing at something one of them had said, laughing while I hid like a frightened animal just a few feet away from them. The second time was worse. I passed too close to a checkpoint I didn't even know existed. The guards saw me. They yelled. They fired. Bullets whizzed past my head, hitting rocks and sending sparks flying. I ran in zigzags, using every evasive technique I'd learned, every trick I knew. A bullet grazed my shoulder, tearing the tissue and leaving a burn mark on my skin. I didn't even stop. The pain was nothing compared to the terror of being captured. I knew exactly what they would do to me if they caught me. I had already done the same things to deserters and traitors. The irony was palpable. I climbed a cliff that shouldn't have been climbable, my bloodied fingers finding handholds that barely existed. Something supernatural gave me strength. The same presence I felt on that mountain now propelled me upwards. It held me up when I should have fallen. The guards didn't follow me. The cliff was too dangerous, too steep. They let me go, thinking I'd probably die anyway, lost in the mountains. They were almost right. The following days turned into a haze of exhaustion, hunger, and thirst. I lost track of time. Was it the 16th? The 17th? The 18th? The days blended together in a ceaseless movement of putting one foot in front of the other. I was constantly talking to God now. I still didn't really know how to pray. I didn't know the right words, the proper rituals. I just whispered in the darkness, "If you're there, if you're really real, help me. I don't know what to do anymore. I don't know how to go on. Please." And he answered, not with audible words, but with strength when I had no strength, with direction when I was lost, with peace when panic threatened to engulf me, with presence when loneliness became unbearable. One night, exhausted beyond any limit I imagined I could reach, I collapsed onto the rocky ground and wept. "I can't go on," I whispered to the starry sky. "I can't take another step. I've reached my end." And in that moment of total surrender, I felt something. It wasn't physical, it wasn't tangible, but it was absolutely real. Invisible arms enveloping me, a presence sitting with me in that darkness, sharing my pain, carrying my weight. "My strength is perfected in weakness," that familiar voice whispered. "When you can't, I can. Rest in me." I slept right there, in the open air, something I would never have done before, and nothing happened. No patrols, no wild animals, just 8 hours of deep, restorative, almost supernatural sleep. I woke up with the dawn feeling inexplicably renewed. My muscles still ached. My stomach was still empty, but my spirit had been restored. I got up and kept walking. It took me 19 days in total to reach the border area. 19 days that should have killed me 10 times over. 19 days of small and large miracles, of unexpected provisions and supernatural protection. The border was as heavily militarized as I remembered from previous operations. Watchtowers every 500 meters. Floodlights sweeping the ground every 20 seconds. Constant patrols roaming the line with trained dogs. The barbed wire fence was new, built in the last few months. 6 meters high with barbed wire on top. Getting through the official checkpoints was absolutely impossible. Even with legitimate documents, it would be difficult. As a wanted Taliban defector, it would be suicide. I would be arrested in seconds and handed back to my former comrades. I would have to try the smugglers' routes. The same routes I used to pursue Christian refugees trying to escape. Routes I knew intimately from years of counter-smuggling operations. The irony was so great, I could almost touch it. I waited until midnight. The moon was hidden behind dense clouds. Good. That would give me better cover, but it would also make the terrain more treacherous. Those mountain trails were dangerous even during the day. In total darkness, every step could be my last. I began to cross slowly, testing each step before putting all my weight on it. The terrain was rocky and unstable, with dangerous inclines. Each loose stone could trigger a small avalanche or cause me to lose my balance. If I slipped, I would fall off a 100-meter cliff. One too sudden movement and I would make enough noise to alert the patrols. It was like walking a tightrope in total darkness. "Please," I whispered as I moved. Please guide my steps. Show me the way. I was halfway there, maybe 300 meters inside the border zone, when I heard voices. Male voices speaking Dari, beams of lanterns cutting through the night like swords. A patrol coming straight at me from the north. There was nowhere to hide. The terrain was too open in that part. The bushes were sparse, too small to conceal a grown man. The rocks were too low. I pressed myself against the hard ground, squeezing my body as much as possible, trying to camouflage myself in the shadows and among the stones. My lungs wanted to hyperventilate, but I forced them to breathe slowly and steadily. Panic threatened to drown me, but I suppressed it. The voices were getting closer, 30 meters. I could distinguish words now. Now they were talking about the cold, about how much time was left until their shift ended, about the food that awaited them at the station, 20 meters. Their flashlights swept across the ground in intersecting patterns. Any second one of those lights would find me. I was in completely open ground. It was impossible for them not to see me. 10 meters. I could hear the sound of their boots on the gravel. I could smell the cigarette smoke coming from one of them. I closed my eyes, not out of cowardice, but out of total surrender. Please, I whispered so softly my lips barely moved. Please. Then one of the guards shouted, "There! Movement to the west! I saw it!" They all turned abruptly. Their flashlights pointed west, the opposite direction from mine. They rushed that way, shouting orders, their radios crackling with urgent reports. I hadn't seen anything to the west. The ground was bare, but they saw something, or someone made them see something. I didn't question the miracle. I got up and ran. My legs found strength that shouldn't have existed after 19 days of malnutrition and exhaustion. My feet found support on ground that should have broken my ankles. I crossed the last 200 meters in minutes that felt like seconds and hours at the same time. Time itself seemed to distort. And then I was on the other side, in Pakistani territory. Technically safer, though still full of dangers for someone like me. I collapsed to the floor, my legs finally giving way completely. I cried for the second time in 19 days. I cried with profound relief that touched me to the bone. I cried with overwhelming gratitude. I cried in amazement at what had just happened. I had crossed 200 kilometers. I escaped several captures. I survived with almost nothing. And at every step, at every critical moment where I should have died, someone intervened. "Thank you," I whispered between sobs. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." I didn't know what else to say. Words seemed utterly insufficient. They found me 2 days later. I was wandering around half delirious on a dirt trail. A group of 4 men in an old rusty pickup truck. Normally I would have been extremely cautious, but I didn't care about anything anymore. Dehydration and hunger had clouded my judgment. They stopped beside me. The driver got out, a burly man in his 50s with a peculiar scar running across his face from his left chin to his jaw. Normally that scar would have triggered my fighting instincts. Now it only made me think that this man understood suffering. "You need help, brother," he said in Urdu, a language I understood reasonably well. "I need to get to Peshawar," I replied, my voice hoarse from days without using it. "Please." They looked at me with obvious suspicion. My accent gave me away as an Eastern Afghan. My appearance suggested serious problems. Torn and filthy clothes, a thin face, sunken eyes, untreated wounds. "I can pay," I lied weakly. I had nothing. Not even the rifle, which I had hidden before crossing because carrying it would obviously be suspicious. The group leader approached, examining me with eyes that had seen much in life. He looked directly into my eyes for a long moment, which seemed more like a spiritual assessment than a physical one. Then he smiled slowly. "You don't have money, brother, but you have the eyes of someone who has recently seen God." My heart raced. How could he know? What did he see in me that revealed what had happened? "Get in," he said, gently helping me climb into the back of the pickup truck. "We don't charge for God's work." During the 3-day trip to Peshawar, we talked. I discovered that Asif, the group's leader, was a Christian, a secret believer who used his work as a smuggler to help Christian refugees escape Afghanistan. "We do this every 2 weeks, he explained, as he drove along terrible roads that shook the truck violently. "We bring refugees and take them to safe houses. It's dangerous. We could be arrested or worse, but it's what Jesus called us to do." "Why take such a big risk?" I asked, genuinely curious. He smiled, the scar moving with his expression. Because someone risked everything for me. 15 years ago, I was like you. Lost, running away, hopeless. Some missionaries found me and loved me when I didn't deserve it. They showed me Jesus. They changed my life. Now I do the same for others. I told him a little of my story. Not all of it, not yet, but enough. About the old man I couldn't execute. About the guns that wouldn't fire. About the light and the voice. About the 19 days spent crossing the mountains. Asif wept as he drove. God is so good, he murmured repeatedly. So good. He told me this morning that I was going to meet someone special. Someone he had just touched dramatically. And here you are. We arrived in Peshawar on the afternoon of the third day. The city was overwhelming after weeks in the desolate mountains. Noises, smells, crowds, chaotic traffic. Everything bombarding my exhausted senses. Asif took me straight to a refuge house on the outskirts of the city. It was a modest, two-story building, painted a faded blue, surrounded by a high wall. Nothing special on the outside, but inside it was a sanctuary. The door opened even before we knocked. A middle-aged woman, her hair covered and her eyes welcoming, greeted us. Sarah, I discovered, was the wife of Elias, the director of the shelter. They were both Iranian Christians who had left their country years ago to serve Afghan refugees in Pakistan. As soon as I crossed the threshold, Sarah stared at me for a long moment. Her eyes filled with tears. She came closer and hugged me tightly, as if I were her long-lost son, finally coming home. "Welcome back," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "Welcome back, son." At that moment, I didn't understand what it meant. I didn't understand how a place I'd never been could be home. I didn't understand why that stranger was hugging me with so much genuine love without knowing anything about me. But I would understand in the following weeks and months. Gradually, I would understand completely. The first few days in the shelter were simultaneously the best and the worst of my life. The best because I was finally safe, fed, and cared for. The worst because everything started to surface from the depths of my mind. Now that I was no longer in constant survival mode, reality began to catch up with me. They gave me a small but clean room, a real bed with clean sheets, a bathroom with running water, normal food, rice, bread, vegetables, sometimes chicken. Unimaginable luxuries compared to the last few weeks. But the nightmares intensified exponentially. Every night, without exception, I relived the executions in cinematic detail. I didn't just see them, I felt them. I felt the weight of the rifle in my hands. I felt the recoil when firing. I saw the blood gushing. I heard the screams abruptly ceasing. The faces of the people I had killed surrounded me in the darkness, more vivid than when they were alive. Their voices rightfully accused me. They called me what I was: murderer, monster, demon in human form. One young woman in particular, about 25 years old, visited me every night. She had been captured reading the Bible to a small group of children. I executed her with her own hands tied behind her back, while the children watched in horror. Her last cry before the gunshot echoed in my ears. "Jesus, receive me!" And then her 4-year-old daughter ran towards the body screaming, "Mommy, Mommy!" in a voice that would haunt me forever. I would wake up screaming, drenched in sweat that soaked the sheets, trembling violently. The whole bed was shaking. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought it was going to explode. Hyperventilating, unable to breathe properly no matter how hard I tried. Elias would rush into my room every time. It didn't matter what time it was. 1, 2, 3, 4 in the morning. He never showed irritation or frustration. He would just hug me while I trembled. He spoke to me in a low voice. Words in Farsi that I didn't fully understand, but that still brought peace. And he prayed. He prayed in that same language, with words that flowed like music. Sometimes he prayed in tongues, sounds that didn't belong to any human language I knew. And when he prayed like that, something changed in the room. The oppression dissipated. The shadows receded. I could breathe again. "The demons are attacking you," he explained one morning after a particularly brutal night where we stayed up from 2 to 6. "They know you were marked by God, ripped from their kingdom. They're furious because they lost you, but they have no real power over you. Jesus is stronger." They began to teach me, systematically, patiently, without external judgment, although they were certainly horrified by the things I confessed. Sarah would sit with me for hours every afternoon, reading the Bible to me in Dari, my native language. She would read about Moses, a murderer who fled to the desert and became the liberator of millions. About David, a man after God's own heart who also committed murder and adultery. About Peter, who denied Jesus 3 times but became the rock upon which the church was built. Especially regarding Paul, Saul of Tarsus, who persecuted Christians, imprisoned them, voted for their execution, watched the clothes of those who stoned Stephen, and uttered threats and death against the followers of Jesus, until Jesus himself stopped him on the road to Damascus. God is an expert at transforming persecutors, Elias said with deep conviction. You are not the first to do terrible things, and you will not be the last. But when God decides to redeem someone, when he marks a life, nothing can stop it. Not your past, not your guilt, not the demons that want to keep you chained. But the guilt was overwhelming, physical, tangible, like carrying 37 bodies on your back every single moment of every day. I had killed 37 people with my own hands. I had given orders that resulted in countless other deaths, families destroyed, children orphaned, widows weeping. How could God forgive this? How could I forgive myself? What right did I have to a second chance when I denied it to so many others? You can't forgive yourself, Sarah said gently when I confessed this one afternoon, tears streaming down my face. I had cried a lot lately, 17 years of frozen tears now flowing freely. That's why you need Jesus. He carries what you can't carry. He pays what you could never pay. That's grace. But it's not fair, I protested. Those people lost their lives. They deserve justice, and I deserve punishment. You're right, Elias agreed, joining us. It's not fair. Nothing in grace is fair. If it were fair, it would be called justice. But God chose mercy. He chose to pay the price for your guilt. Jesus was punished for what you did. That's what the cross means. They showed me the scars on their own hands. Elias had been tortured in Iran before escaping. Sarah had lost her brother, executed for his faith. Both suffered deeply. Both forgave deeply. Forgiving doesn't mean what happened was right, Elias explained. It means we relinquish the right to revenge. We place it in God's hands, and He is perfectly just. He will do what is right. We don't need to carry that burden. It took 3 months of intensive teaching, constant prayer, and guided inner healing before I was ready for the next step. 3 months of reading the Bible daily, memorizing verses that Sarah wrote for me on cards, and learning to pray in my own clumsy words. 3 months confronting literal demons that appeared in dreams, trying to convince me that it was too late, that it was too dark, that I was too broken. For 3 months I heard that voice, the voice of the mountain, reminding me, you are mine. No one will take you from my hand. Finally, the day arrived. August 5th, 2019, at 5:30 p.m. Everyone in the shelter, approximately 22 people from different countries and backgrounds, gathered in a large room on the 2nd floor. They had filled a large plastic basin with water. Public baptism in a church was too dangerous for refugees. The Taliban had informants everywhere, even in Pakistan, so they did it in secret, at home, but it was no less sacred. Elias asked me to stand beside the basin. Sarah was holding an open Bible. The other refugees formed a circle. Many already had tears streaming down their faces because they knew parts of my story. Rashid, Elias said, his voice formal but affectionate. Today you give public testimony of your faith before these witnesses, before the angels, before God himself. Do you believe that Jesus is the Son of God? Yes, I replied, my voice firmer than I had expected. Yes, I believe so. Do you believe that he died for your sins? All your sins, even the most serious ones? And that he rose again on the 3rd day, conquering death itself? Yes, with all my heart. Yes. Do you renounce your former life? Do you renounce the hatred you were taught, the violence you practiced, the darkness you served? This question carried more weight. It was specific, personal, not theoretical. I renounce, I said, tears welling in my eyes. I renounce completely, forever. That life died on that mountain. I am no longer that man. Elias smiled broadly. Then I baptize you, Rashid, in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. You die with Christ. You rise with Christ. Your old life is buried. Your new life begins now. He submerged me in the water. The world went completely silent underwater. In that moment of total suspension, I felt something break. Physically, spiritually, as if invisible chains that had bound my soul for 17 years instantly disintegrated. The weight of the 37 bodies dissipated. The suffocating guilt evaporated. The accusing voices fell silent. Everything that was dark, everything that was broken, everything that was contaminated, it was gone. I got out of the water breathless, crying, laughing, all at the same time. I could barely breathe from so many emotions. Elias hugged me tightly. Sarah hugged me. The other refugees came one by one, hugging me, crying with me, celebrating with me. I was a new man, not metaphorically, literally. The old Rashid, the executioner, the Taliban commander, the persecutor of Christians, had died there underwater. The one who emerged was radically different, reborn, recreated, redeemed. And for the first time in 17 years, I felt true peace.